Good morning, everybody. You are about to watch an amazing episode of GoJo Golic. Here's what you have to look forward to on today's show. The Electoral College. And no, we're not talking about politics, okay? We're going to be talking about football. Just relax. We'll explain everything when we get there. Plus, NBA power couples. Charlotte Wilder is going to join us. We're going to make Love is Blind into kind of like a NBA couples who's going to make it to the championship thing. It's going to be pretty cool. Plus, fan interference. We saw what happened to that fan last night as he tried to rip a ball out of a Dodgers mitt. It was crazy. We will talk about all that and more coming up on today's episode of GoJo Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here with you guys. We're presented by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal. And we got a great show for you today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check it out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. As Jesse mentioned, Charlotte Wilder going to be here in hour number 2 to play some NBA games. And we'll also, coming up in about 15 minutes, talk to former Red Sox first baseman Kevin Millar, who knows a thing or two about authoring the kind of comeback that the Yankees got started with last night, down in an 0-3 hole to the Dodgers, and looking like it was going to go that way again, Dad. You get another Freddie Freeman home run, this time a 2-run shot to put them up 2-0 at the beginning of this game here. Now his 4th in a row in this series. We know his 6th in a row going back to the series with the Atlanta Braves, but the Yankees are able to rally in big part thanks to Anthony Volpe, the hometown kid who went out and authored a grand slam in the World Series to put the Yankees ahead. They never relinquished that lead, and so now they get to force a Game 5 coming up tonight here. Dad, we both were doubters yesterday, and Anthony Volpe, I mean, what a cool moment that had to be for that guy who grew up on the Upper East Side, was a kid that had always been a Yankees fan, had gone to the last World Series parade in 2009 as a kid, and now gets to stand on second base and listen to the home crowd of his childhood favorite team chant his name as he helps lead this team to victory.
I mean, seeing the picture of him at the parade in the 2009 Yankees parade as a kid, and then hitting a grand slam in the 3rd inning, you can't. If you wrote that up in Hollywood, they would say, "No, that's too sappy. There's just no way that's going to happen." But it happened after the fans and the team going through the mental downgrade of Freddie Freeman hitting another home run in the first inning. You're down 2-0. You spot 2 runs. And I know it's a long game, and obviously the Yankees came back and won it, but you had to be going, my God, he did it. He did it for a 4th game. 6 World Series game in a row. What is with this guy? All the big boppers that are on both these teams, and it's Freddie Freeman who's hobbling around. Thank God he's hitting home runs because he can't run, though he did beat out that throw
I was
to first
just
base.
Say, he ran that. He let
really
that thing
did.
out at first base and got the review to put another run on the board.
He did. He absolutely did, and that call was right to call him safe. He's been getting just nonstop treatment on that ankle. But, boy, being able to jog around the bases more than having to run has certainly saved his ankle to be able to run when he had to. But just your head and heart just has to drop in the first inning saying, my God, he did it again.
Well, I laughed so much because I was watching the pregame show with Big Papi and A-Rod and Jeter, and one of the first things that gets uttered, I think it might have been from Derek Jeter, saying, you've got to have, if you're the Yankees, a scoreless first inning. Your bats have been struggling. The offense has been hard to come by, and so you don't need the pressure that comes with being in a hole after the first inning. And so what do? You're not only in a hole, but you're in the hole at the hands of the guy who, people are going to question whether or not you should even be pitching to dude at this point in his situation like that, let alone in the first inning when you're trying to avoid all that. And so, yeah, you're right, Dad. To make that mental jump from, oh my God, here we go again, to somehow finding it. And again, when you're in a situation like that and teams, and thankfully this team has so much success to point back to, they could go and find this. But for a lot of teams that have been losing for a long time, when you get to that quicksand of here we go again, you're kind of looking around wondering who's going to make the big play. And so for Anthony Volpe to sort of crack that open now, and who knows how that carries over. That's why I'm interested to talk to, Kevin Millar, who again was a part of that 0-3 comeback for the Boston Red Sox in 2004 against the New York Yankees. What goes into that in a clubhouse? People can debate momentum in sports and all that, but what does it actually take behind the scene to mount a comeback in the face of a situation where everything you do is do or die? And that got going in a big way last night. Now, Dad, some people will attribute what happened last night to something that happened in the first inning of this game. And if you're watching sports and dissociating from the fact that these are human beings and not just characters in a play, easy to laugh at this because it looks like a Tim Robbins sketch what went on. 2 Yankees fans were ejected in the first inning of Game 4 after one tried to pry the foul ball out of the glove of Mookie Betts on the I think it was the right field wall.
Right field.
Dad,
Yep.
This is one of the more insane things I've ever seen, where you've got one guy trying to pry the ball out of Mookie Betts' glove as he goes to try and catch a ball that was going foul. Another fan trying to hold his offhand from doing so. The fact that no one got punched is an act of God and mercy for Mookie Betts, quite honestly. And both of these guys should have been thrown out and should be banned for life. Like, this should be simple. Once you remember that these are human beings and not animals inside the middle of this game, and you should never touch the merchandise, especially like this. These dudes should never see the inside of a ballpark in Major League Baseball again.
It's one thing to try and catch the ball because it's in foul territory. And if you want to, as a fan, the opposing fan, want to try, we've seen this before, obviously, want to try and catch the ball, that's fine. But neither one of these guys had a glove on, and the one guy is first trying to rip Mookie's mitt off and then reach into his mitt, as you said, to take the ball out, and Mookie's reaching with his other hand, and the other dude's grabbing that hand, not letting him go into the mitt. I mean, listen, they needed to get to the one thing, those two will never have to buy a drink in New York again. Right? They'll be hailed in the local bars that they go to. They won't have to, but they absolutely should have got tossed from that game and did get tossed from that game. Mike, I mean, it's usually a bang-bang play in foul territory. This, I mean, my God, this was like, okay, the dude's got the ball right in front of us. Let's get it out of his mitt. Let's have an effort to rip his mitt off, rip the ball out of his mitt, and stop him from getting to it. That was amazing. I guess we shouldn't be stunned in part, but I was a little stunned at the ferocity that the fans took to try and get the ball out of his mitt.
Yeah, and I know those guys got interviewed after, and both of them basically knew they were in the wrong right away and got the hell out of there. But it's one of those things that doesn't help you after the fact, because Dad, Mookie Betts' poise is the only reason that this didn't get worse than it was, because you and I have both played with plenty of guys who, in that moment, would have just seen red, like would have blacked out the minute someone started to try and mess with their hands in there. And then, Lord, I mean, whatever happens after that, those fans took their own safety into their own hands by touching the people that play the game. But there are plenty of guys on either side, quite honestly, that could have made that a lot uglier than it was. So we should be thankful for that. But again, it's not something we need to flirt with readily here. So Major League Baseball has to come down hard on that to make sure they set a precedent, because you're right. Like, and listen, at the beginning of this, you can't help but laugh because the situation's so ridiculous, and then you kind of remember the realities of the situation. And while, yes, those guys will be local heroes, I'm sure there needs to be an active deterrent for this kind of behavior so that this doesn't become something that happens more regularly.
Yeah, this wasn't just some quick thing. I mean, I know they showed it in slow motion, so it looked longer than it was. But I mean, this was an actual act to get the ball out of Mookie Betts' glove, the ball was in his glove. This was by two guys. I mean, they I don't know if they knew each other, but they teamed up to try and, it was one of those things where they just lost all form of thought, right? And just tried to help their team. I get it. They just tried to help their team, but they obviously went too far. As you said they knew they went too far. And yeah, you got to crack down hard on that, because that just wasn't simple interference. Man, could you imagine if they hurt his hand, hurt his wrist, trying to pull his glove off, trying to pull the ball out? And Mookie Betts was definitely ticked, but he was backing away, and I'm glad no other fans got involved. That could have turned ugly, and it didn't. It was over with quickly. And we got back to the game, and we got back to the Anthony Volpe story, who, by the way, was 1 for 12 with 7 strikeouts going into that game, and ends up going 2 for 3 with a grand slam.
Yeah, it's amazing the turnaround for, like, again, all the Yankees offensively and the cavalcade of home runs that gave way to in that game. Him, Austin Wells, Gleyber Torres. And so we'll see what that could ignite. So we'll talk a little bit more baseball coming up in about 10 minutes. It's a big night on television in general tonight now. You've got Game 5 going on. You've got a couple of big NBA games, Boston and Indiana, San Antonio and OKC. So two of the top young bigs, two of the top getters, odds. Two of the players with the best odds to win Defensive Player of the Year in Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. You've also got the Love is Blind Season 7 reunion. So, Brandon, put the poll at GoJo and Golic on Twitter. What are you watching tonight? We'll have those or other, as you can write in anything else you might be checking out as we lead up to some big-time action there. But, Jesse, the World Series, not the only source of controversy yesterday, as the Indianapolis Colts decided to make the move at quarterback that people were curious about.
Yeah, the NFL machine rolls on. Anthony Richardson is being benched. Joe Flacco is backo. And we discussed Richardson taking himself out of the game because he was tired, as he said. Did that play a part in this benching, or was it strictly performance-based? Before we answer that, here's Colts center Ryan Kelly on Richardson tapping out because he was tired.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we had a conversation about it, and, I think he knows it's not the standard that, that he needs to play up to and the rest of the team holds him to. And I'll kind of leave the conversation that we had at that. But, I'm sure he's going to take some criticism for that. It's just rightfully so, right? I mean, that's a tough look. But I'm also, he's out there giving it all for his team, right? And it's not always pretty sometimes, an offensive lull the last couple of weeks, just having a hard time getting going at times. I thought we did some good things in the game, but if anybody ever questions how hard he plays, I don't think that that's the case. I mean, if you watch his film, surely, we didn't move the ball effectively at times, but I mean, he's giving it everything for his teammates. So he's young. I'm sure it's a learning moment for him. And leave it at that.
Well, he's going to be learning from the bench because this comment, coupled with the fact that Joe Flacco played really well, seems to support the idea that this change is happening. But do you think the comments are what sort of pushed this over the edge?
I think it's got to be a big driver in this, Dad. And I mean, I saw Mitchell Schwartz, former NFL offensive lineman, point out that for Ryan Kelly to say as much as he did there, where offensive linemen usually not wired to do such things, pretty telling about what the state of the locker room probably was coming off both the action and the comments. Now, we can have a larger, macro debate about how funny it is that, and you brought this up yesterday, Anthony Richardson's being asked to operate as a pseudo running back in their run game. Running backs and receivers, defensive linemen, DB tap out all the time and get subbed out in games. But a quarterback does it and everyone loses their minds. But it's the standard. It's what we're used to around the NFL. And then to be as cavalier about it after, for guys who fight tooth and nail for the opportunity to be on field, who value that opportunity in a way Anthony Richardson didn't there. This seems like something done with the other guys in the locker room in mind. I think more so than the production on the field, because Dad, if this is just about the production on the field, this is incredibly short-sighted by the Colts, but I understand this might be a moment where it's a reminder that Shane Steichen's not just coaching the quarterback on this team.
Well, yeah, I think the tapping out on a play all goes into the blender with the play on the field. I think it all gets mixed together, but I thought Ryan Kelly's statements were pretty telling. I mean, normally, and he did try and talked about cover for him, how he works hard and stuff, but he definitely got the message across that he was talked to, and that was not the standard. And you're right. Quarterbacks, listen, they can be held to a different standard. But I heard other quarterback analysts say the quarterback works the least hardest on the field and shouldn't be most tired. Now, quarterbacks in today's game definitely run a little more than quarterbacks back in the day. So they can be a little more tired, but I can see an old lineman being ticked off. They're out there every play. I mean, they get up and they're limping around and they don't even think about coming out of a game. So I would imagine that turned off some teammates. But I got to believe this is, again, we talk about reasoning, and I think this is more obviously production on the field. He's got 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, completing a league low 44% of his passes. There's just no production when he's on the field. And this team, by the way, is 1 game out of the playoffs. You have the 4 division leaders, and then you have the 3 wild cards with 3 losses. The Colts are 4-4. The Colts are 1 loss away from being in the mix for the wild card. And, oh, by the way, a team they're 2 games behind in the Houston Texans has 2 of their top receivers, 1 done for the year in Diggs. Nico Collins can come back, I think, November 10th with a hammy. So they could be in a lot of trouble. So the Colts need production, and Joe Flacco's completing 65% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception that he has. So this is a move. Mike, you have to make for the rest of the players, saying there's something to play for this year. This isn't a 1-6 team. This is a 4-4 team with something to play for.
I guess to an extent, but I still think, do you not think Anthony Richardson sees the field again this season? Because I do.
All depends on how they play. Listen, if they're in the playoff hunt and Joe Flacco has them winning, then hell no, he doesn't see the field again. You got to play for the year. You got to play for.
So you just nuke the future of the quarterback you spent a first-round pick on last year. Are you saying you're done with Anthony Richardson then? Because if you don't start him the rest of the year, it's over.
Well, then so be it. So be it. If they're winning and they're pushing for the division lead, you're going to pull Joe Flacco and put Anthony Richardson in just to maybe pull him again? Imagine if they're in the playoff hunt, you put Anthony Richardson back in and he doesn't produce like he hasn't been producing, and they start to fall out of the play. I mean, you can't do that. I get he was the 4th pick. I get it. But listen, you got a responsibility to the other players in that locker room, especially if you're fighting for a playoff spot.
I also think to an extent, I don't know, this brings up the argument that happened yesterday about how quarterbacks get developed in this league, because you'd essentially be throwing away a quarterback that you knew needed time and reps, that hasn't had time and reps, that you drafted knowing he needed time and reps to work with the coach that you brought in that was good at developing quarterbacks with his skill set, and you'd be throwing it away after not even a full year as a starter in the NFL.
But did you think it would be this bad? There's developing, and then there's, you know what? You're playing, you're 5 fumbles, you lost a fumble, 44% completion, 7 interceptions. You're just not seeing the field well enough and leading this team, so maybe sitting is better for you as well.
Yeah, sitting for a brief time and then coming back out is one thing. If you sit him the rest of the season, It's over. There's no coming back from that. We saw it. This is Trey Lance all over again at an organization that is not the 49ers. Like, I do think there needs to be some self-awareness here. You're not perennial contenders if you're Indianapolis. You're not the 49ers who are choosing between a Super Bowl floor and then trying to go beyond that with Trey Lance and balking at the notion of that. You're the Colts who've been mired in mediocrity more often than not recently. And so I just think it's a fundamental flaw in the plan, and that needs to be more addressed going forward. I get doing the right thing for the rest of the team this season, but you've lied to yourselves in the process of getting to this point.
They made the decision in Carolina, right, with Bryce Young. They made that decision.
Made the decision
only reason
and decided they were done with him.
Dalton
That's what
hurt.
I'm saying, is they're done if they sit him the rest of this time.
Then you're done with them. I mean, hey, that you got it. You can't waste years if you're in it. If you're in it.
It's one thing if you're Carolina and you picked the quarterback that was supposed to be ready-made and you expected him to be good right away. I do think it's another if you're Indianapolis and you knew you were taking on a project and now all of a sudden when you got to roll your hands up and do work, it gets uncomfortable and you cut bait and run. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Hoping to talk to World Series champion and former Red Sox first baseman Kevin Millar in just a second about the Yankees' attempted 0-3 comeback here. But, Dad, we were just having the conversation about Anthony Richardson and his future here, and I think it's going to be a real interesting flashpoint when you couple this with what we just saw happen with Trey Lance a few years ago, where NFL teams take on these quarterbacks with extraordinary abilities that show us something in a limited sample size in college that are a little bit of a projects, and they try and bring on as more of a developmental guy in the NFL. Now with two of them potentially being shown the door before the work can get anywhere close to done here. Ultimately, I want to get to, you agree with the Colts potentially benching Anthony Richardson for the rest of the season in name of pursuing a playoff run this year in order to appease the rest of that locker room?
I mean, it's not all to appease the rest of the locker room, but if you can make a playoff run, I would say you make a playoff run. Now, I certainly have my doubts. I'll say that. I think Joe Flacco will play better than Anthony Richardson, but I don't know if it'll be an actual playoff run. Listen, I get what you're saying. We saw it with Josh Rosen when he got picked early by the Cardinals. We saw it with Trey Lance. We saw it with Bryce Young. We see it with Anthony Richardson. I know Anthony Richardson and Trey Lance are more the package because we know they needed the development stage. But if the development is coming along this slow and it looks this bad on the field, I mean, again, are you done with them? That I don't know. But I definitely agree with the benching now.
I agree with the benching now. I would probably put him on the field before the season was done again, just to try and make abundantly sure you're not throwing away this guy right before you get to the breakthrough that you've been looking for. But they see him behind the scenes. They know what he's done behind the scenes. And so if they don't think there's enough progress being made, it may be an unfortunate situation where the timing and some of the early injury stuff just wiped away the chance here. We can talk more about that at a later date here, but we've got Kevin Millar with us now, MLB TV analyst and part of the Comeback 2004 Red Sox documentary you guys can check out on Netflix, and one of the certainly voices and catalysts of that whole moment. So, Kevin, we appreciate the time this morning. Does it feel eerily similar right now watching what the Yankees got started with last night?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? It's ironic how you have a documentary that comes out on Netflix on October 23rd, a week before all this, and then you're thinking we got a World Series, Dodgers-Yankees going into the series. It looked like a 7-game series, maybe 6. You could pick a team who's going to be hotter at that time with this little layoff. And then it goes out and it's 3-0 Dodgers. And it happens so quick. And and I know what that feeling's like, because it's the Yankees now, and you're looking up like, okay, how do we win 4 straight? The only thing that gives you hope is, ironically, the Red Sox come back in this big, great rivalry. So they got a W last night. It gives you a lot of happiness, because it's not happiness when you're down 0-3 in a 7-game series.
So how much has the attitude changed with you guys when you got the first win when you were down 0-3, and now the Yankees got the first win down 0-3? You still got a long way to go, but at least you started the process.
Yeah, Mike, it's funny because when Poppy hit that home run in Game 4 off Paul Quantrill that gave us our first W, sports is all momentum, right? It's like a first half you play crappy, and then you go in for halftime. In football, you come out and you're like, is this the same team? Or the NBA has these huge runs. Who's making their threes at this moment? Baseball, similar, right? But when he hit that home run in Game 4 in 2004, we were at home plate. It felt like we won the World Series, and we are still down, right? 3-1. But that momentum shift kind of just went like this. Now, Game 5 is obviously a big, huge deal. But I'll tell you right now, this is why I don't like what goes on these days. I have to go through jugulars when you're at a level like this. I have to try to win Game 4. It seems now we could set stuff up, and maybe we can come back with this guy, and we'll give our best opportunity and best chance. And it all looks good on paper, but there's still human factors, right? You still have umpires that are going to make some calls at certain times. You still have the errors and all kinds of stuff that go in, so it's never scripted perfect. That W last night for the Yankees is big. Now you have Garrett Cole, right? Now you have Garrett Cole in Game 5, and then they could sit here and mix and match. And the Yankees bullpen's been great. Last night was a weird game for the Dodgers. They've been great. So this is still going to be a good series, but, you got Jack Flaherty, who pitched a great game and matched up well with Garrett Cole in Game 1.
You mentioned Garrett Cole going to be back out there. They don't have to go to Luke Weaver last night, so he'll be ready to go for tonight late in the game if need be. I'm curious, though, from the decision of who he's going to pitch to here, at this point, are you throwing at Freddie Freeman anymore? I mean, a guy who almost squashed that. You talk about going for jugulars last night, the 2-run shot to start things off in the first here. He's been on a tear. What do you do with that guy if you're an opposing pitcher and an opposing staff trying to make sure you don't get in the hole?
I don't miss inside to him right now. You see how quick and violent he is, just quick to the baseball. And this guy is an absolute warrior. You have a guy that has been injured. He was limping around the bags. Like, the Dodgers know that he's better, that they're better with him in the lineup, right? He just gives that depth, that 3 MVPs on top. it was a little sad the series before because you're thinking, I don't think he can get, play. He's almost hurting the club because he couldn't run. He was station to station. You can't hit a ball in the gap. And then this little layoff for the World Series, all of a sudden he came back, and now he's Babe Ruth. In my opinion, Freddie Freeman's the best hitter in baseball. I've said that during the year. I love his approach. He stays center. He hit 300 when the shift was available. He hits 300 when they stopped the shift this year, and you only can go so far over the bag. But he's a great teammate, went through a ton of stuff this year with his son Max this year. So you gravitate to that dude. And I don't know if I'm coming inside at all, if I'm the Yankees in Yankee Stadium, because it is remarkable what he's done.
Yeah, incredible what he's done. And on the Yankee side, it's incredible the year Aaron Judge had. He's going to be the AL MVP, but the postseason has been anything but. He did have a hit last night, had a run, had an RBI. But what do you make of so great in the regular season and just slumping in the postseason?
Yeah, it's bad time, right? Baseball's hard, and you fail, and you fail, and you fail, and then you get hot, and then it goes like this. You hit 380 in April, you hit a $190 in May, and right now, Judge, he's off, right? And it's such a short amount of games. You can go four for 35, and it becomes like the sky is falling. This guy drove in 144 RBIs. This guy hit over 320, and obviously the power with 50-plus home runs. He's carried this club. He's a wonderful human being. He's got a great demeanor. Struggling on this stage really stinks, right? It stinks for him. You get aggressive. Last night, I saw the game slow down a little bit. And he will be fine if the series continues to go on. But you get anxious, right? You're a human being. You got nerves. You're trying. And by the way, they are pitching him perfect. I mean, the book is obviously it's one fastball in. You've seen him swing it. You've seen him just miss a home run, foul it off, take it. And then it seems like there's 4 or 5 breaking balls down away. He's just been a little aggressive. The calmness, I thought, that first at bat when he walked, it kind of slowed him down. Then he got a hit, and then the Yankees win anyways. Their middle infield drives in 7. Volpe's unbelievable. Even before last night's game, it's exactly what the Yankees needed as a baseball player on that field. He is that kid. And to see a hometown guy last night to do what he's done, and I think it was the first time the Yankees in the World Series, you had 2 stolen bases and 4+ RBIs, which shocked me. But it seems like every night there's a record or something that we haven't seen this game.
Yeah.
It's certainly been that kind of series already, which makes us excited that we get more of it with Game 5 coming up tonight. So take us inside now what the time in between last night when they finally get this offense going, they get that much-needed win, to when they go and get ready to lace them up again tonight. What's going to be going on with this team, and what were you guys doing in the midst of a comeback, trying to maintain that momentum that you had picked up from Game 4?
Yeah, you just have to understand as a group. That's why I said you have to brush stuff off, right? When you're down in a hole, it's like no more like feel sorry for me or oh my God, I can't believe this happened. You have to go out there, and it's just every single inning and every single pitch, the focus has got to be there because you can win games. The intangibles, base running. We've seen the Yankees have not been good base runners at all. That's not their strength. But in these series, you can't get caught slipping because outs, right? Volpe actually, before things got going, you saw the ball off the wall that Wells hit. It was a weird deal, maybe his angle or something. But if Wells gets to third there, Volpe scores there, that game's now tied 2-2 in that moment. And those are the little things. If they lose that game 2-1, hypothetically speaking, think about it. You're sitting here, it's a devastating loss, and it was just a simple base running. We've seen them get picked off, but the Yankees don't, they can't afford to have any mistakes right now. And that's just where they put themselves. But at the end of the day, you're focused. They have some confidence now. They have some energy in the stadium. Fans are important. We don't have home field advantage like football or basketball, but the guy in the mound controls the tempo, and you got your $300 million guy. This is why you signed Garrett Cole out of UCLA. This is why he's a star. Who else would you want to give the ball to than Garrett Cole to the New York Yankees? It's going to be a good game, and the Dodgers got to figure out how to get ahead, right? Get a lead. They were 76 and I believe 16, which is like an 820% when they score first, including the postseason. It didn't work out last night, but they're still a scary team when they get the lead.
Yeah, the Yankees have their $300 million guy in Garrett Cole. The Dodgers have their $700 million guy in Shohei Ohtani, who is trying to gut it out. I mean, do you see him being able to be aggressive on the base pass at any more during this series if he gets on base because of that shoulder?
Yeah, I love his toughness. Boys, he showed us something, right? Like, we know what a great player and we know what just a great guy and how great he is for this sport. But, boys, there's some toughness there. You see him run off the field, you could tell the jiggle, jiggle, jiggle when you're running. That shoulder, that's what kills him. So he sits there and, whenever he gets out, he runs off the field holding his collar. I think he's still special. I think if the moment says that he's going to steal a bag, I think it's all in. I think your chips go all in right now. Everybody's sore. Everybody's arms are 80%. That's part of this game. We play a ton of games. You football players, I feel bad for you guys, right? You don't have that guaranteed money. Now you do. But back in the day, I used to mess with Steve Young. I'm like, you guys are cute little fellas. You play 16 games. It's so cute. We got like 200 games. But he goes, well, you guys leave the game with the blister. He goes, you guys got 6 weeks out with a blister. We got dudes with broken arms tackling guys and limbs are falling off. So we have some fun with that. But Shohei Ohtani showing some football mentality, looking tough out there. Him and Freddie Free.
I was going to say, those are two guys that probably, if you put them on a football field, would have been damn good players, too, the kind of athletes that they are. But, Kevin, we mentioned off the top, the documentary Comeback, the 2004 Red Sox story on Netflix right now. What's it been like reliving that in the midst of this great postseason run and seeing something so similar now, going back through when you guys managed to pull off what, I was growing up a kid in New England at that point. It was one of the defining moments of my sports lifetime then. So what's it been like to go back through this?
It brings back so many memories. Obviously, it came out on October 23rd. I hadn't seen it that first night, and I'm like kind of excited because then you start getting some texts from people, and it brings back, like, I sat down with my son, and he had 5 buddies coming over. He's a senior in high school, and we sat there, and I said, no phones. We're going to go upstairs. We're going to watch this, but I don't want any phones. I'm like that phone dad. I don't like the phones. I want you to engage. So my kids know that. Their friends know that. We go up there. The problem was we watched this. It was remarkable. So many great memories. I thought Netflix did a wonderful job on just the editing and understanding. Because I asked one question, what's going to be different? The 4 days in October was a great, ESPN put out something when we first won that. And now what's going to be different of the 04 team? We know Millar walks, Robert steals, and then Poppy homers, and we win the World Series. They brought a lot of 03 team back, which I appreciated, and because that 03 team broke a ton of records at that moment. So it kind of just ties the bow on that group that we weren't the best players. We were the best team, but we could hit and we cared about each other. It's all this stuff that you talk about, as a team, right? Before you go into camp, you're trying to win a Super Bowl. Everybody has a chance. I don't care what it says on paper. Some are behind the 8 ball, but you can go out there and win that football game that day if you execute, right? And it's the same thing in baseball. Go play the game. There's noise around. We got talk shows. We all talk about stuff. But, like, at the end of the day, when you have a family and a group of guys that care about each other, we had that. You can't buy that, but we had that. And it brought back a lot of memories.
It was an incredible memory for a lot of people, and watching that again certainly brings back a lot of that stuff. It was a special group, and now you've got, ironically enough, a Yankee squad trying to pull off what you guys did in this postseason series in the World Series. Kevin, we can't thank you enough for all the time and insight, man. We really appreciate it.
Boys, appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Kevin.
Awesome stuff there now. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the Electoral College for the CFP race next on GoJo and Golic.
to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. here. And we're taking this very seriously. We're going to continue to remind people to do their civic duty, go out and vote, because it's really important to have your voice heard, about who should and who should not be elected to the college football playoff. Okay, that is what we're talking about, the college football playoffs. So yesterday we did some early polling on teams. Now let's talk about which wins and losses could propel or keep out teams, okay? So here's a reminder of the actual electoral college and how this all works. The top 10 states here. So we're kind of going to talk about teams, which losses are big, which losses really matter, could propel them, you know what I mean? Like as if these losses count for more, the same way some states have more electoral votes. That's kind of what we're getting into, what we're alluding to. So let's start with Texas. Lost to Georgia, no shame in that. Wins over Michigan, Oklahoma, close one last week against Vandy. What would you equate that to, fellas?
A little bit of a civics lesson here in the lead up to the election for some people that may not be as familiar or need to brush up on all these things. There's no shame in it, and we're here to help you out. That being said, Dad, the college football playoff does work in very much the same way, because we know all losses and wins are not created equal. And so you look at a team like Texas, who for a while spent time at number one this season, obviously got thoroughly outclassed by a team like Georgia, who's sitting there at number 2 right now. So if you were to equate that for Georgia, that would be like losing a state like South Dakota, where it's only 3 votes in the electoral college. It's not going to sink your ship if you're someone trying to get elected, much the same way that loss isn't going to be the thing that sinks Texas ultimately this season. Now, they've got wins against teams like Michigan that were ranked at the time but are unranked now, and obviously have had a pretty abysmal season by their standards there. They've got a close win versus a Vanderbilt team that should be ranked right now. So if I was looking at them, they would be worth probably like 7 electoral votes. That's a team that should be top 25. I think was receiving the most votes at the end of the poll there. And you've also got a blowout win against an Oklahoma team that's unranked but a rivalry game. And so Texas is sort of an interesting resume to consider, Dad, because on field they've looked like one of the best teams in college football, with the exception of really that first half, maybe half and third quarter of the game against that Georgia defense.
Yeah, and they may get a rematch against Georgia in the SEC title game, which if that happens, you have to believe both teams are in, right? Because if they win out, if both teams win out and have one loss, they're in the SEC title game, and I would imagine loser is going to be in as well with 2 losses. Listen, let's be honest. And we're talking about the top 12 here that make the playoffs, and we know a group of 5 has to get in, so someone's going to get dumped out. The worst loss, when you're talking about electoral votes, the worst loss is Notre Dame's loss, correct? I mean, Notre Dame is sitting at number 8, but of the top 12, it absolutely has the worst loss, losing to Northern Illinois, which has now lost 4 wins. But their best win is looking better and better each week, the more Texas A&M wins.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you've got to weigh in all these situations. And to your point, the math of the conference championship changes the equation completely this year. Because in years past for the 14 playoff, it was, hey, that's a nice resume point you got there, but it's not by any means your only entry ticket to the dance. We'd seen enough instances of that to know you could make it without being a conference champion. Now, yeah, making sure you're in position to get to that championship game sort of can nullify. Because for some of these teams, Dad, we're going to end up asking the question, hey, who's actually your best win if you whiff on a couple of big games on your schedule? Even if you look like one of the best teams and then only net you like 2 losses, where's your marquee win that we're going to point to? That one, not a problem. So Texas, we can sort of put off to the side because they control their own destiny right now. They've still got a viable path to the SEC championship. It runs through Texas A&M at the end of the season. That rivalry renewed in the last game of the year. That's now a conference game for those two that I think is going to go a long way in the meantime. But Texas right now, solid resume. The on-field portion is the other part we're not talking about here, where people are going to eye test this and say, hey, yeah, you got thoroughly outclassed by that Georgia defense, but that defense seems capable of doing that to a lot of teams. See Clemson in week 1. Jesse, let's talk about the team that beat Georgia, though. Alabama is going to be a really interesting case in this right now. They sit in the rankings currently in the AP poll at 14. So OLI outside looking in, but they own arguably the best win in college football this year.
Yeah, so they have that great win over Georgia, but then they have that really bad loss to Vandy. So how does this work? They have an okay loss in there too, but you got a great win and a really bad loss.
Yeah, Dad, this one's interesting too because I do think we also need to recalibrate a little bit what it means to lose to Vanderbilt. Like, yes, Alabama and the way they internalized that was, we have not lost to this team in 40 years. Nick Saban never lost to this team. The sky is falling on the road in a half-finished Vanderbilt stadium. But we've also seen since then, this Vandy team has gone out and performed really well, gave Texas all that they could handle. And Texas and Alabama didn't stop being very good teams. I think Vanderbilt's come a long way. They're a much more respectable program now. And so while that loss felt one way at the time, I actually think it's aged a little bit better. It's still bad, but it felt like the Notre Dame Northern Illinois loss, and it's very clearly not that anymore. Like, Notre Dame's loss far worse than the one we're talking about with Alabama to Vanderbilt, given what we've seen.
Oh, absolutely. All the talk of maybe 4 SEC teams getting into the playoffs, I just don't see that happening, though. I think Alabama has a tough road to try and break into the top 12. Tennessee, they still have to play Georgia. Texas A&M still has to play Texas. I see a tough road for the SEC in getting that 3 to 4 teams in that everybody talked about. And Alabama, I think, is in a very, very tough spot with 2 losses and that loss to Vandy. But again, a lot has to do with the committee and where we're looking at the AP rankings and saying top 12 is in. The committee doesn't look at the AP rankings, or they're not making this part of their ranking. So where is Alabama? Are they in the top 12 in the initial college football rankings? That's going to be a key, is where are the placement of the teams? Are they on the outside looking in? Are they right at the precipice of dropping out? Because again, 12 in a Power 4 is going to be knocked out if a Boise State is below 12 because they automatically get 12. So the importance of where the college football committee places teams is going to be really, really important.
And I do think Alabama might be a team that might be a little bit higher in that poll than they are in the AP poll, just because I do think that Vanderbilt loss, when considered now in totality, because that's the other thing. The College Football Playoff Committee wasn't asked to do preseason rankings. They get to do what most people wish would happen with all the polls, is they get to take in this information. And what have they seen? Hey, Vanderbilt's been pretty good this year. Georgia looks really good. And so those powers combined, you have a 1-touchdown loss to a Tennessee team that people also respect. And maybe the situation, again, they're not dominant by their own standards, but by the rest of college football standards, would that be more respective here? Jesse, Dad brought it up before. Let's get to Notre Dame, who is so important that Jessica Smetana, our great friend over at the Levitard Show, saw fit to use some of her time with the vice presidential nominee Tim Walz yesterday to ask about the fate of Notre Dame in the first playoff ranking. So we should probably get to that if it's important enough for him to address right now.
So the question is, does that loss to Northern Illinois weight the win versus Navy and Texas A&M? Like, how much of an impact is that Northern Illinois loss going to have here? That's the question at hand.
Oof.
Dad, it's going to be a huge impact. And again, I think it's more so when we talk about other teams, Alabama is a great sort of foil for this. Alabama still has a game against LSU coming up on the road, a ranked LSU team still, a game against Oklahoma on the road, and a Iron Bowl game against a rival in Auburn who's not ranked, but it's still a rivalry game. They've got opportunities to show out. Notre Dame's really got Army. And that's about it at this point. Florida State counts for nothing and no one right now. And USC, even at the end of the season, while that's still, I think, going to be a difficult game because of the athletes that they have, that's not a team that I think are a win that the committee is going to respect all that much. And so if you're Notre Dame, you don't have the opportunities that a team like Alabama has to continue to put that loss in the rearview mirror.
That's why I think it's important to see where the committee places Notre Dame. Is Notre Dame like at 11 or 12? Are they on just right on the inside, but maybe, again, if they're at 12, they would get bumped out by the group of 5 team because they're not going to raise. The only reason they'll go up now is if teams in front of them lose, and that can happen because teams are playing each other. if Ohio State loses to Penn State and has 2 losses, they're going to drop behind Notre Dame. But if Penn State loses to Ohio State and they both have 1 loss, they probably both would stay ahead of Notre Dame, because you're right. Notre Dame's only big game left is against a ranked Army team. They beat a undefeated ranked Navy team, and Navy's already out of the rankings. And Army's sitting at 21. If Notre Dame were to beat Army, they would probably drop Army out of the rankings as well. But it would be a win against a ranked team. Other than that, you're right. Florida State, Virginia, and USC aren't going to buy you much. So to me, it is important where they're placed in the initial seedings of the College Football Committee. Can they be in that A spot? If they're in the A spot, I think they're going to be okay. I think obviously they have to win out. If they win out, I think they would be in.
I would agree. I think especially because there's been clear improvement in the on-field product, and that's another thing we've always talked about. Lose early if you're going to lose, and Notre Dame doing it in the back-to-back weeks with Texas A&M. Not ideal for me to internalize as a fan and someone whose mental health is tied to this team, but for them, losing early and then showing drastic improvement as they've gone along, especially offensively, I think is something that a very human committee is supposed to take into account. So I'm with you. If they're ranked inside the top 10 in the first ranking, they've got a really good shot. Now, it is interesting. Ohio State plays Penn State. Ohio State also plays Indiana. That's one of the few conferences where the top teams, the undefeated teams, are actually going to play and knock each other out. Right. We know the ACC, Miami, and Clemson aren't going to play in the regular season. We know in the Big 12 you're not going to get that with BYU and Iowa State. And so there's some conferences that going right up until the end are going to have some interesting tiebreaker situations. And if you've got multiple undefeateds in conferences that only send 2 to the title game, those could be the other ones to watch out for potentially with Notre Dame. Jesse, I want to move ahead a little bit and get to Ohio State, because they're one that's going to be a big one coming up this weekend and will be in one of those matchups that's potentially a knockout game.
Yeah, so they won against Nebraska, won against Iowa. They lost to Oregon. So how do we feel? Do you have to wait until after next week to kind of decide where this is going? Is that how you feel about the situation? Right now, you can't really make a determination?
I would say that's the case. And, Dad, Ohio State becomes a really interesting team if they somehow lose this game to Penn State. Now, Penn State, we know there's some questions about the quarterback availability with Drew Aller leaving this in the second half of their win from last week. But if you're Ohio State, right now, your resume is pretty unassailable. And now you had the close call against Nebraska. I'm kind of willing to excuse that away as a look-ahead game against the team that's built well in the trenches in Nebraska. But if they were to lose this game to Penn State, then all of a sudden you're looking around at Ohio State's resume at some point and going at the end of the year, all right, who did you beat? Now, Indiana would certainly be one. If they end up getting that game, which I'll be interested to see the line on, that would be a good resume point. But Ohio State structured their schedule in the non-con with the understanding that, hey, we just got to go and clear the deck in the Big Ten and we'll be good. If that doesn't happen, I think they'll still probably make it, but it puts a lot in the hands of the committee if they're a team that's outside of the Big Ten championship looking in potentially.
Well, yeah, obviously, if they lose to Penn State, I think they're going to be, though they'll have obviously their shot to beat an undefeated Indiana team, because Indiana will move up some of the rankings if Ohio State were to get their second loss, and then Ohio State could get another good win against Indiana when they play them if Indiana stays undefeated. I do think Ohio State is in a decent position to not be in the conference championship and still make it as a 2-loss team. I think they could have a chance to do that.
And I think what that would take is if you did somehow lose to Penn State, it's got to be close like the Oregon game, where it's one or two things go your way and all of a sudden, because most people I think came off that Oregon game and we said those teams look like they're about the same. Those teams look kind of equal, and Oregon, you could say, benefited from the home crowd in a lot of cases in that game. And if that was played on a neutral site, does things level out for Ohio State? So that's a team that could, even though they wouldn't have a marquee win outside of Indiana to really point to, Dad.
Again, the easiest road to me is Miami, right? I mean, they don't play any of the undefeateds in the ACC, and they should have a smooth. Now they've kind of messed up on their own in some high scoring games, but they have the easiest path to their conference championship game and a place in the playoffs.
They do. The conference championship game going to be fascinating the way Clemson's playing ball right now. That one, the most mystery surrounding it. We didn't even have time to get to a team like Indiana that does have the ability to crash the party, especially if Curtis Rourke is able to come back as quickly as they hope before that Ohio State game. Lots to do. A reminder of the importance to get out and vote and do your civic duty. Oh, and also worry about the presidential election.
All right, guys, at the beginning of the show, we launched a poll on Twitter because there's a lot going on tonight that you can watch. So we put a poll out, what are you watching tonight? Love is Blind reunion, World Series Game 5, NBA, and then other. And overwhelmingly, World Series Game 5 with 60.5% is in the lead, followed by other and Love is Blind and NBA. Actually, yeah, Love is Blind is not dead last.
Wow, that's stunning to me because I certainly don't care if Bob and Claire are going to date or not. So.
Oh, come on.
Oh, come on. Bob and Claire.
Good
That was
names.
season 2. Grow up.
Yeah, Bob and Claire.
Is it Tim and Jane? I don't know.
I mean, these are some old
You'll
school
find
names.
out the names coming up in a little bit because me and Charlotte Wilder are going to have a field day with this and some NBA pairs that you won't want to miss. She joins us next on GoJo and Golic. right, hour number 2 here on GoJo and Golic. We got an NFL vibe check coming up in a little bit, a look at the start of the NBA season. And to do that, we are joined on a Wednesday from a woman who's usually here on a Tuesday, even though it's kind of still on a Wednesday. I've lost track of the days. Charlotte Wilder's here. She's the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan. Every day but Fridays now during the fall here. Charlotte, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you. You know, I think the good thing about a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday is that it could be a Wednesday, it could be a Tuesday, but no one's gonna, don't get too worked up about it. I'm gonna figure this out. This one's on me. If you think it, here's the good news about my showing up on a Wednesday is that instead of me on a Tuesday and you're thinking it's a Wednesday, I'm here on a Wednesday. And if you're like, oh, it's Tuesday, and then you realize, oh my God, it's Wednesday, you are actually a day deeper into the week than you thought you were.
I'd like to talk about the fact you guys are taking Friday off and trying to make it sound like it's because of sports when it's really you guys get a 3-day weekend.
Proud of you.
I mean, that's it, right?
First of all, I wish I could take credit for something that brilliant. It was a scheduling thing because we used to be every day but Monday. And it turns out it's actually a lot easier to talk about stuff on a Monday when stuff has happened over the weekend, then try to talk about it on a Tuesday when it's like, is that old now? What do we do? And then a Friday where people just aren't quite as locked in. So I, for one, am thrilled from a content perspective. And you know what, Senior? The life aspect of it also does not hurt. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you.
Charlotte, you don't have to apologize for going and creating your own 3-day weekend. It was one of my favorite pastimes. When we were in summer school for Notre Dame in football, we were out there and we would do our workouts Monday through Thursday, and we would get Friday off for any number of reasons that our strength staff would spin about recovery and all that. But it just meant it was easier for us to get over to the TC pool and for me to have about 2.5, 4 locos on a summer afternoon and an empty stomach and wind up laying down on the ground for a long time. So again, you don't have to apologize for living the life that you create for yourself here. We're happy for that. We're happy for the content. Charlotte, the NBA is not happy with the 76ers right now. And quite honestly, I want to play this sound from Nick Nurse because we are not even a week and a half old in the NBA season. And yet the 76ers, who got fined $100,000 for their public comments about Joel Embiid's health as him and Paul George both sat out to start the season, poor Nick Nurse was put up in front of the media yesterday and seemed like he has already been through about half a season's worth of drama. Listen to this man as he fields questions about the health of his star players.
You guys got the update? Okay, we're in parts of practice. On we go.
It sounded like...
Sorry, apologies, but go ahead.
With Joel's plan,
I'm not going to answer. Go ahead. Anybody else got anything?
What was different?
They've given you the updates on that, right? They've given you the updates on Joel.
Like, Charlotte, I've understood coaches getting a little bit testy at the mic when it's, hey, you've been answering these questions for months and it haven't changed. It's been a week. What does it have to be like behind closed doors there for him to be this thoroughly miserable already at the microphone?
You know, Mike, I've often said that Nick Nurse, I think ever since when he was the head coach of the Raptors in 2019 and he got on the team plane, not with a carry-on, but with a guitar. Do you remember that? He had a guitar case. And I was like, you know what? I understand now who this man reminds me of. He reminds me of a guitar teacher who used to be in a band, was pretty good. And then, you know, for life reasons, or maybe they just couldn't hack it, he started teaching this, you know, suburban kids how to play the guitar. This man looks like someone, he looks like the guitar teacher who has dealt with the most entitled kids for like months on end who just will not practice at this point. That's what those are the vibes I'm getting from him now. I think that, to me, the most telling thing was that right after Joel Embiid signed that massive contract, he said, you know, I'd probably never play a back-to-back again in my career. And I think that I would probably be more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt if he hadn't said that, just because, you know, he played in the Olympics. Like, this is a guy who was prone to injury. I don't know. I wish I did. I wish I had an inside source at the Sixers. If you're at the Sixers and you want to let me know what's going on, like, please, my DMs are open. Charlotte at meadowlarkmedia.com. Like, I'm ready for it. But I think that almost doesn't matter, to be honest, because at this point, I think it's really the public perception that Nick Nurse is battling whatever Paul George, whatever Joel Embiid are or are not dealing with. The fact is that everybody assumes that there could be something shady going on, and that's the exhaustion that I think you see in Nick Nurse's face, Senior.
I mean, this team got Paul George to compete in the East, and they're not only talking about Joel Embiid not playing in back-to-backs, but Paul George as well, and they have 15 back-to-backs. I mean, it just seems almost incomprehensible that they missed those many, because those are just that you're choosing to miss, let alone if and when they get injured and have to miss time.
Well, and I think that's the point to remember with Paul George right now is he hyperextended his knee in the preseason,
right.
And so now he's missing with that, and I think a bone bruise is a result of that. So there's something concrete to point to. Joel Embiid, to Charlotte's point, spent the summer playing with Team USA. Now, we know he had to ramp back up to play in that. There was a process where he was sort of playing himself back into shape after dealing with the injuries at the end of the last NBA season. But that situation's a little bit more ambiguous, and thus the fine's tied to that. While Paul George feels tied into this because neither star is on the court for these teams, that situation is one that feels, I don't know, maybe a touch more linear, whereas now Charlotte, I don't want to say this situation with Joel Embiid is fully going the way of Kawhi Leonard, but based on his injury history, I don't think it's all that far off. He's just a guy we actually know more about than Kawhi Leonard, where so much of what happened at the end of San Antonio was shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, this was the problem that the Sixers were faced with when they had the decision about what to do with Joel Embiid's contract in the offseason, where it's like, you have a Ferrari. They don't make many of them. There is simply no other Joel Embiid, right? There just isn't. The fact that Ferrari happens to break down a lot and you don't know if there are replacement parts, that also didn't matter, because it was like, what are you going to do? Not pay Joel Embiid? Do you know how many teams are going to pay Joel Embiid? And I think that what the problem is here, Mike, I don't know if it would be different on any team, to be honest, but the fact that the Sixers have built their whole legacy around this guy. I mean, it is trust the process, which is basically at this point saying trust Joel Embiid. And it's like, okay, I think everybody would really love to. And you know what? Maybe if there were fewer games in the NBA, maybe if there were a policy that allowed you to have a star who got hurt a lot, but then be ready for the postseason. But right now, the NBA, I mean, last season, especially going so hard on having their star players play, and load management doesn't actually stave off injury and all of these things, it's like Joel Embiid being a superstar right now and the league policy and what the league wants and what fans want are kind of directly at odds with each other. So if you don't come up with a way to make that work, if you don't have everybody in a room being like, okay, we get it, Joel gets hurt, which also, like, he's a huge guy. It's not his fault. It's just like the way things are, the system right now, the process right now, and Joel Embiid, I don't know how those things are meshing, and I am really glad it's not my problem, to be honest.
Well, I tell you what, a young Tyrese Maxey is going to be really lonely on the court without the older players for a lot of the season. We'll see how this team does. That's the drama on the court. Jesse, Joe Mazzula keeps giving us gold, absolute gold, doesn't he?
He is a content machine every time he gets in front of a microphone. So on his weekly radio hit, he said he'd be interested in some interesting rule changes.
We've been kicking around some proposed rule changes in the league. What if?
I love this.
What do you got? You have some proposals?
Come on.
Yeah, like basketball is one of the only sports that doesn't have a power play. And I think soccer just put in the blue card where a guy has to go off and it's 10-on-9. And so, like, we should have a power play where, like, because let's say you get a technical or let's say you get a take foul, you get the one shot, but you're not really rewarded for that, because if you miss it, you don't get the reward.
Oh, I love this.
The biggest thing that we rob people of from an entertainment standpoint is you can't fight anymore. We should just bring back like fighting. I just don't get why some sports are allowed to clear the benches. They have bats and weapons. We don't. We just have a ball.
Remember during the ring ceremony when he was like smelling the floor and he said he wished it smelled like blood? Well, apparently he's going to make that happen if it's up to him.
Yeah, I would say Joe Maz going full Ken Watanabe, let them fight. And I mean, listen, I'm sure he's not alone he's speaking for a lot of people that are old school NBA fans. And I think it's less even that, Charlotte, more just the physicality that so many people complain about there. But I also believe that Joe Maz would like them to have weapons and like them to fight, considering everything we know about him.
So I think Joe Mazzula is an agent of chaos. And this is a title that I reserve for people in sports who there's a pro wrestling aspect of Joe Mazzula that I think is very strong. And I think that it's very difficult to know whether he knows exactly what he's doing. I personally think he does know exactly what he's doing. I think he's smart enough. I think he's a very bright guy. And I think the fact that he can go on, Boston radio and say, oh, we should allow fighting, and doesn't know exactly what he's doing. And he, a guy who watched The Town, like, yeah, I'm sure he would love fighting, but I'm sure he loves saying he would love fighting more, because you know what he wouldn't actually love? When someone kicks him in the shin and then he's out again for 3 weeks. Like, yeah, sure, it sounds fun. Like, I just think that this is a man who, sure, maybe he believes it. I think he has the media wrapped around his finger, and I think we need to give him a little more credit for how planned it actually is than just like, oh, crazy Joe Mazzula.
Well, I also think, Dad, it's interesting. He says that with the team that I associate with maybe the least inclination to get into a fight of any team in the NBA.
Well, and listen, the power play thing, that's funny. It's never going to happen. So, I mean, there's no worry about that.
It's not a bad idea.
But as far as the physicality of the game, you go back into the 80s and in the 90s, really the 80s, when people say when ball was physical, but they brawled all the time. A lot of that was driving the lane. When you drove the lane, you took your life into your own hands. You got dropped, and there was rarely anything called. And if it was called, it was just a regular foul. But you thought about, it's kind of like going over the middle in football when they used to let you just lay a guy out. You thought about going over the middle and catching the ball. You thought about the hit maybe more than catching the ball. Or if you drove the lane, you thought about getting hit more than maybe trying to put a short shot up. Well, it's an NBA. It's a 3-shooting NBA now. So you kind of lose. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not driving the lane anymore. They are. But I think Joe, to Charlotte's point, I do think he wouldn't mind some of the physicality back in the game, but his team doesn't really play that. You think of Boston, you think of the tough player, but they don't really play that style.
No, I mean, they are the absolute zenith of the three-point revolution. They're currently leading the league again in three-point attempts per game at 50. So, Charlotte, this is a team that stylistically just is kind of that runs counter. So maybe it does give more credence to your theory that Joe Maz knows the buttons he's pushing, because, again, he has the team that we talked about this yesterday, has forced the take out of Nick Wright that they need to do something about the math of basketball because it's ruining the entertainment product, and that seems to be staring right at the Celtics team.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, okay, or everybody else could just keep up. Sorry, I had to. I think that Joe, I have really enjoyed his being in the league. And, I think I sort of hope he doesn't run for office or anything, because this is the sort of thing that's really fun from your coach, but like you don't necessarily want from anybody else. I think the entertainment factor he has completely nailed down. He has built this sort of mythical persona. It certainly seems pretty consistent. So if it's a bit, I'm super impressed. If it's not, maybe that means a bunch more championships, or maybe that means that it's going to be weird going forward, Gojo.
It's an interesting relationship he's got with his team and with Celtics fans. And since sports is all about relationships, Charlotte Wilder knows this as well or better than anybody. Coming up next, we're going to put that to the test. We're going to take a look at some of the best couples in the NBA and see how they stack up against the folks from Season 7 of Love is Blind and the insanity that's unfolded there. You're not going to want to miss it next on GoJo and Golic. So if some of you guys aren't familiar with the depth and breadth of Charlotte Wilder's work, she has long been known as the czar answering the question of, is it sports or not? And Charlotte Wilder famously pointed out very early on, as so many people in sports media dip their toes into reality television, that the Bachelor Bachelorette franchise is in fact sports. For a variety of reasons, a reality dating show is in so many ways sports, because sports are at their core about relationships and about gossip. All we are is a gossip show for sports. And so we thought we'd combine those two into a world that celebrates Love is Blind, which is in its 7th season, has its reunion episode coming up tonight, and for anyone unfamiliar, is a reality dating show where the contestants initially meet and conversate behind closed doors. They cannot see each other, they can only hear and talk to each other before then leaving the pods where they have those conversations as an engaged couple, trying to see if they can make it work in the real world, and ultimately, 7 seasons in, answering the question pretty definitively that love is not blind in almost any case, way, shape, or form. And so we wanted to make the comparisons here, Charlotte, with some NBA duos that we've got around the league right now. Some couples at the helm of your favorite teams to find out who we think they remind us of, and if we believe, therefore, they're going to make it as couples that can go and try and help their franchise win a championship.
I love this. I want to point out that Senior's facial expressions right now, those are correct, because the thing about Love is Blind is that not only is Love not blind, but Love is Blind, the television show, might actually be like psychological warfare designed by the U.S. military. I mean, like this stuff is so bad for you. It is so, like, I can't stop watching. I will never stop watching. I love it with my whole heart. And yet, as I'm watching it, I'm like, these people, the trauma that these people are being put through for absolutely no reason, with an arbitrary deadline of getting married, when in the real world, none of it. Like, also though, please never stop. It's incredible. And yes, I'm ready. Sorry.
So can I ask the question of what couple of players, teammates in the NBA you would compare to Ashley and Tyler? Which 2 weeks before they got married, Tyler made the revelation that he has 3 sperm donor babies, and it almost ruined the trust between Ashley and Tyler. What comparison are you making to NBA players here?
That's a great question, and it's one we're going to answer right now, as Charlotte has accurately described the experience of being an NFL fan, by the way, in her description of Love is Blind. We will focus on the NBA here and get into some of these NBA couples. So I want to start off with Charlotte Wilder's adopted team in the New York Knicks. Now, we've got the new couple of Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. And I actually think for this one, my comp would be Marissa and Ramses, a couple that looks pretty good on paper. We've talked all about, and we've seen some of the chemistry conversations about having Karl Anthony Towns as a stretch 5, a guy who can space the floor for a team that Jalen Brunson leads the charge of. He's the straw that stirs the drink, and it looks good right now, but that relationship we have watched age like milk. It has been so bad. It's ended in heartbreak for Marissa, who seems incredibly sweet, and Ramses, who seemed to be attracted to one thing in the pods and then decide he was not for him when they got to real life. And so, Charlotte, I actually think this could be the case for the Knicks, where it might work early and it might work in the regular season, but I do have questions about it still in the postseason when you've got Karl Anthony Towns not supported by someone like he had with Rudy Gobert in Minnesota, like he could have had with Isaiah Hartenstein if he had not signed with Oklahoma City in the offseason. So where do you stand on that?
Okay, so there's no way what I'm about to say doesn't sound really mean. So I'm going to preface it with that. I'm going to say that, okay, this is how I'm going to frame it. Worst case scenario, guys, I think Brunson and Kat are Hannah and Nick, because everybody's complaints about Karl Anthony Towns is that he's soft, that he, doesn't go as hard as he needs to, that he can be shifty. Thing about Jalen Brunson is he is going to show up 110% every night. He's very intense. He goes really hard. He knows exactly what he's doing. Hannah had to teach Nick how to boil water, like how to boil water for pasta. So if Knicks fans' worst fears come true, this could be a situation of people saying like, well, of Hannah saying to Nick, you're 28 and the only bill that you pay is your car. Oh, wait, you don't even pay that because your parents pay your car insurance. Like, that's the worst version.
I don't think Cat's that inept.
No,
like,
he's not. He's
and also, I don't think Jalen Brunson seems like the kind of guy to gaslight his partner routinely the way that Hannah did, quite honestly. She was a bit of a monster.
Okay, so I think what I'm talking about then is that the fans are Hannah and Karl Anthony Towns is Nick Dorka. And
that could be the toxic relationship there.
I don't think that is true. I want to put that out there. I think Karl Anthony, I've been very vocal that I think this is a great move, actually. I think Karl Anthony Towns is an unbelievable shooter, not just for a big man, but for anybody. But you asked me, and I prefaced it with, this is going to sound mean. I just feel like maybe it's the fans and Cat if this doesn't go well.
It's fine. You compared them to the most toxic couple on the show. Dad, do you think that this tandem can work?
Not the Love is Blind people,
and Jalen?
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm asking you about the basketball guys.
The real people. Yeah. Yes, I do. I absolutely think that they can work. I mean, Cat's gonna, he loves shooting from the outside. It's a 3-point shooting team, and I think it'll work. But I'm now really just stuck on the show, and I'm just wondering who you think Leo and Brittany remind you of. As far as
yeah, that's a great question. And that brings us to our next comparison here. We talked about the Sixers before, but Paul George and Joel Embiid have linked up right now. And I would say they are Leo and Brittany because we haven't seen anything from them yet at this point. Leo and Brittany. Leo, the young, incredibly wealthy art dealer. And just wait, he'll remind you that he's very wealthy, even though he feels like Batman cursed with this sort of wealth. And Brittany, who seemed to be there in spite of the fact that, she clearly wants people to know how attractive she is. Both of them left for Miami and were allowed to do that instead of going on the honeymoon trip with everybody else. And so I would say just because we haven't seen anything from this relationship yet on the court, Charlotte, they would be my Leo and Brittany from this series.
I think that is really good. I would also say, part of me, no. See, there aren't perfect compare. I was going to say maybe Ashley and Tyler, except that both of them are Joel Embiid and Paul George are Tyler, and the Sixers front office is Ashley. even though the Sixers front office knew that Joel Embiid and Paul George get hurt a lot, and they ended up doing that. It's not like a big secret. They surprised them. I like what you've chosen, GoJo. I also really do think that Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns are going to work, but you have to admit that is a funny comparison if it doesn't. I'm just putting that out there.
Wow, Charlotte, you're really worried about the reception from Knicks fans on this one if you're going back a category already to try and continue to cover your tracks. We'll make sure that you don't get put on blast too hard.
Well, I got to know, another NBA couple has to be Damian Lillard and Giannis, right? I mean, two guys that you would think would have some chemistry but didn't practice at all in the offseason together. So what couple are they?
Mike, this is a no-brainer to me. Are we going to say the same thing?
I don't know, because I think I have a different one than you.
Ooh.
Alex and Tim.
Oh, see, I was going to go Ashley and Tyler for this one for me because I actually think that this one has a chance of working. I think Ashley and Tyler are going to be together at the reunion. I think they might find a way to make this work, but something just seems a little bit off. Like, it seems to fit too well. I think in year 2 for Giannis and for Dame that this actually has a chance of settling in some here. Given the time, everyone seems well-intended for the most part, but there's just something sort of lurking. Again, Tyler, if those are his kids and the situation is as he described it, then he should have disclosed that information earlier, but ultimately it should be something that they can work through. I think that's kind of the situation here where, yeah, for Dame, we know he had this underlying desire to be in Miami instead of in Milwaukee, and maybe that's lurking in the background in a way as subtext that makes this uncomfortable, but I still think they have what it takes to work through that.
So here's why I think that they're Alex and Tim, who sort of got out, who it seemed that they were really into each other before they met and that everyone was pretty excited about them. And then the chemistry just wasn't really there and they were mad at each other a lot. I mean, I think Dame and Giannis sort of look like they are two people who, first of all, Giannis said that they hadn't played together in the offseason at all. clearly something is off if they lost to the Bulls and then the Nets. And they are not playing in sync. They do not seem to be on the same page. The chemistry, I'm not sure is there right now. I think they could be great. And on paper, it seems like they should be great, but like, I think something is off, not necessarily in a sneaky lying way that Tyler could potentially be doing to Ashley, but more in a just like, maybe it's just not there, like Alex and Tim.
Yeah, see, why don't you set up the next couple? I'm getting a little nauseated.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I have no idea who any of the people that we're talking about are. I mean, I know the NBA players, don't know any of these Love is Blind people. But for the Suns, okay, we have Katie and Booker. So we wanted like immediate results for these guys. We're heading into year 2. Is this when we're going to get it? And what's the comparison for Love is Blind? It seems like you guys are not on the same page with your Love is Blind comparison for this one.
Well, I think Gojo's just better at this than I am, to be honest. But
no, I think I just put a little bit too much time into this. And it's tough because they're not all perfect fits here because on paper, there's nothing really wrong with Kevin Durant and Booker being teammates. Now, this is a team that desperately needed a point guard, and we talked to Amin about this, your co-host from Oddball, the other day. Went out and addressed that this offseason, finally, flying in the face of what they thought there. Let's go with conventional wisdom and see it work out here. I went Alex and Tim here. The vibes just seem weird around these guys. Nothing inherently wrong with either of them, but I feel like based on Kevin Durant's previous relationship history, you're always kind of waiting for something to happen. Maybe that's unfair to him at this point, but that's kind of how I feel.
So, okay, I hear you. I see you. I respect you. I think I would go more Marissa and Ramses here because if there hadn't been, no, that's mean. Comparing anybody to Marissa and Ramses, guys, Ramses was really just horrific to this woman, and I actually can't think of any NBA player who's done so. Well, you know what? If maybe Draymond and Steph, if Draymond chokes somebody out again, he would be Ramses and Steph would be Marissa. I'll take Alex and Tim for Katie and Book, but I kind of feel like maybe it could work this year. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like too optimistic. I just think that they're both too good to not get it together at some point.
Okay.
Ramses and Hannah, overwhelmingly the villains from this season in everybody's mind, I believe. Both of them are going to have a weird time on this reunion, I have to imagine. I want to get to one that actually celebrates love a little bit here because there is one couple on this show that I've been rooting for since the beginning, and I do think they have a perfect NBA comp here. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren and the Oklahoma City Thunder in general, just a really good vibes team. For me, they are Garrett and Taylor. Sweet, lovable nerds that since the beginning have seemed destined for each other. The little hiccup with the text message stuff, Garrett, really weird. Don't understand that one at all. I'm glad they worked through it, but brother, your actual truth was so much better than the lie that you told the woman that you love here and are getting ready to move across country for. But that being said, it's kind of like that Chet Holmgren, tall, gangly kid. SGA's a Canadian, just trying to make it happen. They seem very easy to root for and one that I actually think is capable of success, Charlotte.
No, I think this is perfect. They really not much friction. Garrett, I think, just panicked. And I think they're also just all exhausted and a little drunk at that point. So I'm going to give him a pass on. He got a text from his ex and then didn't say that he wrote her back. But what he actually wrote her back was like, hey, I'm engaged. Great to hear from you, but no thanks. So it's like, well, you should probably just say that because that's a really great response. Anyway, I love this. I also think that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is like, he plays beautifully. He's suave. He looks cool. He wears amazing clothes, which is Taylor. And as you said, Chet Holmgren, little gangly, little awkward, but basketball-wise, huge glow up. And Garrett, after marrying Taylor, is what we think, huge glow up. Senior, you look pained.
So I guess I would like to know the outcome. At the end of this season, how many couples actually tied the knot and ended up together?
So, again, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it. We probably should have said that at the beginning, but you're here. The finale's tonight. Get with it. 2 couples made it out of the pods and actually to the altar. It was Tyler, who we mentioned already, and then Taylor and Garrett. So that'll be what's coming up tonight as people try and figure out if love is truly blind, if we see if Nick and Vanessa Lachey can shepherd us through the experience, and we get ready to watch more NBA basketball to see if everyone can make it. Coming up next, we'll vibe check some of the NFL teams that have been struggling so far to start this season, next on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield, and Charlotte Wild are all here. We're bringing Jesse and Dad back into the conversation since Charlotte and I alienated them to have a Love is Blind reunion recap before the episode comes out tonight. So we'll go back to someone that is A, tailor-made for reality television, but also B, involves all of us. And that's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, who actually stepped to the microphone and brought up friend of the program, Thomas Morstead, the Jets punter the other day, who he said handed Aaron Rodgers the elixir of life. Apparently, cayenne and water is now the thing that gets Aaron Rodgers revved up and ready to go, according to Jets reporter Rich Cimini, who said he had to Google the health benefits of this. Jesse, your mom is big into the health space here. Is this something you are already hip to? Is this something normal?
Listen, Yolanda Hadid on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, back how many years ago, did this, popularized this. Yes, Senior, when you thought we were out of reality TV, we pulled you right back in. Let me tell you, Yolanda Hadid did this on television. The mommies have been doing this for years. I've been doing it. Lemon water and cayenne, it's like a morning thing. It's supposed to rev up your metabolism. We're not reinventing the wheel here. Like, Aaron Rodgers keeps finding things that have existed forever and been like, I've just discovered, and then this thing. And everyone's like, ooh, the fountain of youth. Like, no, it's lemon water and cayenne and Botox. That's the fountain of youth, and we've known it for years. Okay?
And here's the thing. It has a name, guys. This was called in the 90s the Master Cleanse.
Yes.
This was in women's health magazines. This is not good for you if you don't also eat food. This is unhealthy. It was like a crash diet. And it was also, it's exactly what you're saying, Jesse. He's like, oh, I discovered ayahuasca. And it's like, well, indigenous people have actually been using that for millennia. But thank you so much, Aaron Rodgers. Go back into your cave, literally, because he also feels like he discovered darkness retreats. This man. It's called the Master Cleanse, and if you read Cosmo in the 90s, you have heard of it.
Yep.
I don't know what to say, but I have heard of this mixture. Yes, I did not know you were going to relate it to the Real Housewives of whatever city they're doing the show in nowadays.
Beverly Hills.
There's a lot of
Beverly Hills.
There's a lot of Housewives franchises now. I know. Was Beverly Hills the OG?
No, it was Orange County, I believe, was the OG. But Beverly Hills was kind of the first one where you were like, oh, these people are actually rich. They're not like committing tax fraud.
But there's a Real Housewives of whatever all over the country. But you're right, both of you, Jesse and Charlotte. These are not invented now. This is not a discovery of, oh, my God. This has all been around for a long time. It's just being brought up again by people who make headlines, right?
Yep. He's probably going to come out with his own cayenne and water mixture that you can buy at Whole Foods or Erewhon now and pay $30 for it.
Hey, if people buy it, more power to them, right?
Yeah,
if people buy into it.
What is the history of America, if not littered with instances of people discovering things that were already there and then claiming they found them anyway? So Aaron Rodgers really just tapping into the fabric of the nation. Obviously, bad times with the Jets right now over the large sample size. But, Jesse, why don't we do a checkup from the neck up for some of the teams in the tri-state area for Charlotte?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's talk about the Patriots here, okay, Charlotte, because we got to talk about your team, okay? They handed the Jets that loss. That was craziness. But was it worth it for the Patriots to sort of right the ship here with Drake May? He gets that helmet-to-helmet hit, out with a concussion. What's the state of the Patriots right now? How do we feel?
I mean, to me, this whole season is like house money after they won the first game and almost won the second. I'm serious. Like that. First of all, I don't know if I can answer your question, Jesse. I don't know if it was worth it. I know that it was really, really satisfying to see the Patriots be the ones to beat the Jets and have the same record, 2-6, as the team with the highest expectations. I would say the Jets, or at least some of the most on the line, even though I never bought into it. I want to put that out there. Thank you. I was right. Bravo, blah, blah, blah. Patriots, lowest expectations, and they've got the same record. And they beat the Jets. And I just, as a known Aaron Rodgers hater, I just think that is really satisfying. So I don't know if it was worth it in the long term, but on Sunday, it certainly felt nice.
Oh, it's absolutely worth it to play Drake May. I mean, the one thing you can say is New England seems to have found their quarterback, and the Jets are going to be without a quarterback. I mean, who knows if Aaron Rodgers is going to try it for another year. I know we have half of this year to go through, but this experiment may be over where New England, unlike Indianapolis, where they may be rethinking, I don't know, Drake May seems to be the guy. 5 touchdowns, a couple interceptions, completing 63% of his passes. The head injury it was one of those, and that's why you can never tell, right? It didn't look bad. It didn't really look like a head injury, but every player is different on how you get affected and how you get hit in the head. But I think this is well worth having this guy in the field, well worth the win. He'll probably miss a week and be back and get the rest of the season to develop. He's already developing at a nice rate.
He's been what the Patriots hoped for so far in a situation that seems impossible to go out and have success with. And we talked about that when he went in there. He's found a way to show enough, especially moving the ball downfield, to a receiving core that I'd have to imagine is going to look a lot different come this time next season. I think you check the box there. And quite honestly, of the New York teams, they're really the only one, or I shouldn't say New York, the New England area, New York area teams, they're really the only ones that can feel good because the Jets, we know, are tied to Aaron Rodgers in a way that feels like that's crumbled at the foundation right now. The Giants could be without their quarterback and head coach come the start of next season. And so for New England, who had to navigate Softgate with Gerard Mayo and the rest of that roster, they seem to have come out on the other side of this, one, getting a win that it's amazing how much easier all that stuff is going to be to digest when you've got that win under your belt. But for all those teams, we're talking about teams in a certain tax bracket right now. None of them are very good, and outside of the Jets, who went all in on this season, none of them have a lot of expectations. I did want to get to this for that reason, Dad, with the Detroit Lions and Jamison Williams, their wide receiver who was already dealing with a 2-game suspension for violating the league's substance abuse policy, now is apparently the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office is reviewing a warrant for his arrest on a concealed weapons charge, a news station in Detroit reported on Tuesday. Dad, this is a guy who already has the gambling suspension under his belt, and since coming out of Alabama, really hasn't been able to get right on a Lions team that had come to rely on him as the deep threat that had shown up this season. He was part of the multifaceted offense that had become a nightmare for opposing defenses, and now you have to sort of wonder at every turn if he's going to be available for this team for one reason or another.
Yeah, his agent said on October 8th, my client, so actually Williams was a passenger in the car. He said, my clients were pulled over for an alleged traffic violation. During the course of the stop, my clients were both cooperative and respectful. With 2 pistols that were found in the vehicle, they were both properly registered, and the driver in the vehicle had the proper credentials to carry them. We've cooperated with law enforcement and will continue to do so, Williams attorney Tom Flood said in a statement. So said, obviously, the guy who was driving was a client of his as well. They both had pistols, but both had the proper credentials. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't know where this one is going to go.
I don't either. The Lions came out with their statement and said he made them immediately aware of the situation. They've informed the league on what they know. It's one of those situations that you're right, could end up being all's well that ends well, and nobody got hurt, all those different caveats. But it's yet another thing that pops up. And for Jamison Williams, if this was one incident and the only thing that had been on his resume, it'd be one thing. But in conjunction with everything else, you just hope at some point the light goes on for this guy and he can simplify his life a little bit so that he can go and continue to use his gifts in a way that's going to change his life forever.
Just to be factual on it, the gun in the backseat was registered to Williams' brother, who had a concealed pistol license. The gun under the passenger seat was registered to Jamison Williams, who did not have a concealed pistol license. So that's where they're talking about the possibility of the warrant. But you're right. I mean, it's a guy who has certainly been in trouble in his short time in the NFL, and someone who certainly has shown some talent on the field. Luckily, they have other weapons to go to, but it's a nice added weapon to have on the field. No pun intended.
Yeah, no, and you'd like to see the strength of the locker room at this point. Like that Detroit locker room, we laud them for the way that they show up for each other, for how close that group is here. And so you'd have to imagine there's a bunch of leaders in there trying to wrap their arms around Jamison Williams, and hopefully that works sooner than later, and we can get to him before anything truly bad happens. All right, y'all, let's finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of your day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and the litany of streaming services that we are on. If you have to miss us live or any of our great guests, shout out to Kevin Millar, former Red Sox first baseman, World Series champion, for joining us to break down the World Series before, and our buddy and, of course, famed Boston Red Sox fan, Charlotte Wilder, the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan every day but Friday here on the DraftKings Network. If you miss either of those interviews, check them out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. This, that, and the third is brought to you by our friends at Knockaround. Head over to knockaround.com and use code GoJo Golic, that's GoJo Golic, to pick up your new pair of go-to polarized shades. Charlotte, I'm sorry, we need to send you some here so you can model them with us in this segment. I feel like you're left out right now, and I feel bad about that.
I know. I was like, well, am I supposed to? I have some hats behind me. Those feel sun-esque, not the same thing. Look, here we go. Headphones.
Okay, she's ready.
You know what? Charlotte looks like a bug now. If you want to look like that, you can do that with headphones. If you want to look like us, you can head to knockaround.com. I just got these the other day. I'm a guy with a big head, and so I went with these frames. Are called the Bright Sides. They fit really well for my head style here. I don't really deviate from basic frames very much, but I got the little bar on here. I feel a little more confident now, and so if you want to dress like that and feel good and not break the bank, Knockaround's where it's at for you. Again, knockaround.com, promo code GoJo Golic. Get a new pair of polarized shades for money that won't break the bank. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third right now. Dad, you can keep the sunglasses on if you want, if it makes you feel special. Lord knows they do that for me all the time. But I'm actually very curious to have Charlotte's perspective as someone that has lived in New York City for a while now, as we've got a new law repealed there. Jaywalking, no longer illegal in New York City. They go back and repeal a law there after information coming back, especially in the serious note, points out that the overwhelming cases, more than 90% of jaywalking tickets last year, were issued to Black and Latino people, so inordinately targeting minority groups in the way that this law was enforced. But if we zoom out for the macro of this moment for a second, Charlotte, I've always taken the ability to jaywalk as a badge of honor, of being able to read the traffic situation faster than any crosswalk sign is going to tell me to move, and have gone so far as to actually be told by a woman that I know that people that wait patiently for the traffic light, specifically men, give her the ick, as if you can't take command of the situation yourself. So where do you fall on jaywalking and the repealing of this law?
Okay, first of all, I think it's great because, shocker. Oh, people of color were more likely to be, pulled over or walked over for this. Like, okay, come on, of course. I will say that I am also very good at it, but Gojo, I read a study that said people are more likely to follow someone who walks into the street. Like, if you see someone jaywalking and you're behind them, you are more likely to just go. And so that's where a lot of people get hit by cars. So I take my responsibility as a jaywalker very seriously, because I think, well, if people are following me, I'm a leader. I need to be sure that I'm doing this, because sometimes I do it and then there's a car coming and I'm sprinting and I'm like, oh my God, I really hope there's no one behind me. So, I think that it illegal or not, it can still be a badge of honor. It can still be a skill that you practice. But I think it is great that the law is no longer involved.
I am a classic jaywalker. I will, within the crosswalk and outside of the crosswalk. But Charlotte, you're right. People that aren't paying as much attention will just start walking. If I, in fact, don't have the walk sign, I'm going anyway if there's no traffic. And if someone just meanders behind me, that may not be lucky for them. But I do it outside the crosswalk as well. Listen, let's be honest. This is great. This is great for pedestrians, and it's bad for drivers, right? Because even if you're a driver and you hit somebody who shouldn't have been, jaywalking, you're still going to feel pretty bad about it. You can maybe not be at fault, but if you kill someone, that's gonna affect your life in a horrible way.
I'd hope so.
It really, honestly, though, as a driver, I will say this. There's certain areas where, the light turns green and you can't turn on red. So the light turns green and it still says don't walk because there's people who are going to be taking a right. And it really grinds my gears when people are walking when it says don't walk, because your only opportunity to turn is when the light is green. It causes traffic. It's a real headache. Okay, so I don't like that, and I just feel like this is going to exacerbate that problem. And at the end of the day, we should all just listen to the little signs that say walk or don't walk, and then we'll all be fine.
It's going to be interesting. I can't wait for the reporting from Charlotte Wilder on this boots on the ground after a few months of this being the case. I'm one that thinks not much will change because people were already doing this anyway, but we'll wait and see on that. Speaking of change, though, Jesse, ESPN continues to add simulcasts to their repertoire, and this one I know our good friend Mina Kimes is very jazzed about.
Yeah, so instead of Peyton and Eli, we're going to get the simulcast here of Bart and Homer, ? Okay, ESPN and Disney are going to have a Simpsons-themed broadcast called by our friends Mina Kimes, Dan Orlovsky, and Drew Carter. So it's going to be the alternate cast for the Bengals-Cowboys game, and I know we all can't wait for this. And also, it's Simpsons themed, so are they going to predict the future? What's going to happen? I don't know.
Very good point. As we know, most of our current lifestyle has been forecast by this show for decades. But I think this is great, Charlotte, because one, as presently constructed, Bengals and Cowboys does not seem like a game that would be overly enticing in its normal form, given the way these football teams have looked. But also just, I always enjoy content made by people who are passionate about whatever they're talking about. And I don't know much, but I know Mina Kimes is one of the biggest Simpsons fans on planet Earth. If you've ever seen her teases on Twitter for appearances on First Take or any number of shows, it's almost always a Lisa Simpson meme. So you combine that with her and Dan, that Mina's called preseason games. Dan and Drew obviously call games a lot more frequently. So I think this is a good blend of something that's been pretty successful in other forms so far.
Yeah, anything that Mina is excited about, I'm excited about. Anything that involves Mina and football is obviously going to be A+. And just adding her passion, not just for The Simpsons, but as you said, Mike, Lisa Simpson. I really admire when someone is so passionate about something that there is something within that thing that they're even more passionate about. And I think that Mina is just going to absolutely crush this.
This is good old-fashioned harmless fun, right? You tune into it, you have a laugh. It's like the Nickelodeon game when they would do the Nickelodeon NFL game. If you want to tune into it and enjoy it and laugh a little bit, great. If you don't, you go back to the regular game, you go back to the regular game. But I think it's a cool thing to do.
Yep, and you're going to have wholesale buy-in, which makes the whole thing go around. Yep. So congratulations to them on that. Jesse, let's get to the third and celebrate one of our friends who's living out our dream.
Yeah, Ross Tucker maybe should have invited you. He had a little side mission. He gave a motivational speech to the Hershey Company before Halloween. Okay, do you guys feel left out? This is kind of like right in your wheelhouse here. Should you have been part of this committee?
Yes. I feel completely left out. And I hope the talk he gave that at every Hershey's employee there gives out the big bars. Because you have to give out the big bars, the big candy bars for Halloween. I hope that was part of his talk. Knowing Ross, I'm sure it was, because that is a key. Now, I understand you may have to have some small candy for some small children, but you got to give out the big bars. That's a key. But I feel extremely left out that I didn't get to talk to the Hershey Company, because I'm sure I would have gotten free samples.
I was going to say, you just wanted the goodie bag.
Yeah. Also, GoJo, this is like your wheelhouse. You review, maybe it's because they know that your journalistic integrity of reviewing candy could have compromised you.
It's a great point, Charlotte, because I can't be bought. I absolutely can. And I take that integrity very seriously in my review of all these products. And so, while, again, none of us can be bought, absolutely, check our Twitter handles after the show.
Every single one.
All of us can be bought. But I'm at least happy that Ross is a man of considerable girth. He is someone that comes of beef. And so, because of that, I know this speech was in safe hands. I know he hit all the right buttons. We'll have to talk to him and find out what the message was, because this is their Super Bowl. This is preparation meets opportunity. This is the thing you grind all year for in the dark in the spring when Hershey's is in there hosting company offsites, lifting all those weights, figuring out what new sugar they're going to put into these snacks to keep me addicted to it. This is when it all pays off. So I hope they're ready to go out there and do the work, and I hope Ross delivered that message accordingly. We hope we got the message to you. If we did, download, subscribe, rate, review. Check out Oddball as well. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.